What would be some of the differences between, working with Freddie and working with John?
Working with John is, I came into Iced Earth as the third singer. And so John was running, he was running the show. Now, John he's not like I never had an experience with John as far as, writing, him being the, stern or whatever, but it was like, hey man, I've got this song. I don't really have any lyrics for it. Run with it. Okay. So I would just basically take whatever he didn't have. And, so ended up having some really cool songs from that. Just because I had a different angle or a different approach.
Sure.
Maybe lyrically, or just had an idea. But outside of that, if John had an idea for a song, he just, this is the idea. Here are the lyrics. This is kind of a basic melody, but make it your own. And I ran with it. So, and that's really the difference. I mean, he was never like, bang you over the head. You got to do it this way or whatever. As a matter of fact, I think probably, like songs like Dracula, where people go, my God, what did John do to you? I was like, well, he didn't really do it. I did it. I thought it was cool doing that like super high shit. And,
yeah.
It was just my choice, and if I would have done something different, he probably would have been fine with it as well. But, like that approach, I was kind of taking the old Sanctuary approach to that song. Because again, another band that I was really inspired by as a young man, and was able to tour with Worrell, so that was pretty awesome. But it's just it was just basically John's vehicle, his Iced Earth, the runner of it, and was very successful with it. So you can't really say much about that. It's just he's very successful with running the band, with writing, still some amazing songs that people still hold on to. He's a guitar player. He has a very distinctive, talk about distinctive. When you hear John's guitar tone and his galloping, it's John. It's very, very distinctive. It's just very much like he plays rhythm guitar like Harris plays bass. You just hear, that's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You spoke about touring. You spoke about Sanctuary. I was at that show actually where you guys played here with Nevermore and Destiny's End here in Cleveland. And I remember going to that tour. And I'm going to take a little way back trip with you a little bit. I remember when you guys played a show in Akron and Ripper came up on stage and hung out with you guys. But the show that I remember the most is when I ended up meeting you guys. And it was very shortly after this. I'll tell you, it's a funny story. It was very shortly after I started my show. You guys played in a venue probably about 45 minutes west of Cleveland, and you played with Jag Panzer and Anvil. I don't know if you remember doing that, but I just remember.
Sure.
What's that?
I definitely remember that tour. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember meeting you guys, and you were, there was about 20 bands that came on the show the first year I did this show. John was somebody that came on my show like 3 different times. I mean, I might have sat down and interviewed him. I sat down at the table at that show with Anvil and Jag Panzer. We did an interview afterwards, but I just remember one of my experiences, and I'm going to share this with you. I always share experiences I've had with bands that have been very good. And I remember the show didn't have a ton of people there, but all I remember is that John getting up, we did an interview. He handed me a long sleeve, a Night of the Storm Rider long sleeve, and he gave me the double CD of Days of Purgatory. Shook my hand, and he said, thanks for supporting us. And I got to be honest, that's really what it really told me a lot about his character in a very good way. And I just want to let you know yourself. I mean, I might have talked to you for a little bit, but I just remember you guys really being one of those bands that inspired me to do this show.
That's cool, man. Well, and here's the thing about that is that the Midwest during those times was very good to us.
Mhm.
Like the it kind of felt like the last bastion for our type of music was the Midwest,
Yep.
and relied on it, and it was really freaking cool because that had to have been one of the first, tours where we were really trying to break through and push through in the Midwest, and we did end up doing several tours, but yeah, all along the Great Lakes, man. I mean,
Yep.
we played, we played in Ohio, in Michigan, in Illinois, over in Chicago, and so like the Great Lakes area was really really cool for us. It seemed as though there were just still pockets of metalheads, and they weren't always the biggest shows, but they were passionate,
Mhm.
and that was always really cool. I mean, the couple tours that we did in Texas, kind of the same way. Like there were just like areas that were just kind of little pockets of metalheads, and that was a really great area. But the Midwest, we ended up moving, from Florida back up to the Midwest to Indiana, where John's from, and that was sort of our base of operation for a while as well. So it sort of make it a little bit easier for us to launch some tours.
Yeah.
From because it put us a little closer. So it was cool, man. Midwest is definitely and still is, to my knowledge, as far as metal is concerned. But it's tough, and we would love to do more stuff, but we just are limited. We have limited, because my career certainly is kind of tough to really take a lot of time off, and then the U.S. is a big freaking place, man, to be able to travel across to get to places and things like that. And we just don't have the, it's a little bit different, like going over and doing shows in Europe. Those shows get, they're packed and they pay for our flights and all that other good stuff, and us getting around. So it's just a little more difficult, and for a band our size, but
Yeah, I remember it was crazy, and the way the metal scene was back in those days. I remember, Iced Earth would come. You might have a few people at the show, then you go and you play something like Alive in Athens in Greece, and you see this crazy triple live album come out, and it's like, man, and that's how it was. Europe was big. A lot of, I think most of the early fan base was in Europe for the band back then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's really how Iced Earth, I think, grabbed a hold in like Germany. It was,
Mhm.
the band signed to a German label, right out of the gate, and really kind of remained on German labels as far as I know. I mean, I guess later on things changed, but they went from Century Media to SPV, I think, back to Century, who then was owned by was owned by Sony. I don't know, but yeah, it was different. It was just a different thing. And if there were anybody else, I mean, and I'm not going to say there are other bands obviously that were doing well in Europe and then not so well in the U.S. as well. But you be able to kind of control your ego a little bit, because you go over to Greece and get treated like the freaking Beatles, and then you come back and to whatever in the U.S., whatever show. I remember playing one in Toledo that was really rough, and I felt like there was like 4 people there. I mean, we still played because we got paid to be there, and the people paid us to see us, and we put on the best possible show that we could with a handful of people there. But it's different, man. It's definitely different, and it's humbling for sure. But you just got to know, hey, man, it may not be as big right here, right now, but later if we keep coming back, and that's what we did, in the Midwest, and then we started going up into Canada a little bit, and like every show that we played after the first tour, there were more people, because people,
Mhm.
because word got around. They were like, "Hey, these guys are pretty good." You know?
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.